Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and we're live on this Friday, the 15th of September, ready to talk to you guys about, well, whatever you want to talk about. Give us a call. 888-564-6173 is our number. That's 888-564-6173. If you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, we've got the number there on the bottom of your screen so that you can call us anytime in the next hour. 888-564-6173 for those of you not watching Facebook or YouTube, listening on the radio this afternoon, whether it's back east on Equip FM or in Texas on Living Water Radio or here in Southern California on our flagship station K-Wave, which reaches all the way from Ventura down to San Diego now. So cool on AM 1110 and FM 107.9, which is been in Southern California forever, and our sister station KSDW as well. On the program today, we've got Brian Brodersen, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. And Brian, we've got a special guest today.
We do, but he's not going to hear any of the questions because he doesn't have his headphones on.
I will put my headphones on.
So,
There's no questions coming through yet, sir. Sir, former student of mine.
This is the legendary Ed Stetzer,
yes,
who is with us today. And yes, I'm proud to say that I'm a former
and now a graduate
student.
and alumnus.
Yes.
Alumnus. I was confused. I was of Wheaton College.
Yes. And so, Ed, it's so good to have you.
Good to be here.
And you've been here, I don't know, have you been on this program?
Couple times, yep.
Yeah, and you've, of course, Saturday morning, you've been on K-Wave.
Saturday morning radio.
Right, with the Moody, is it?
Yeah, it's Moody by Moody Radio, and of course, you're one of the partners and affiliates. We're very thankful for being on K-Wave on FM and AM from Ventura to San Diego, covering the coast of Southern California.
Wow, listen to that.
There you go.
Good job.
Ed's looking for some part-time work.
Yeah, sure.
Announcing.
He's local now, so
yeah, it is. I'm super. I just drove over from my house. It's like 10 minutes to. I'm like being near Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and I think I told you I was when I started as a professor.
Yeah.
98. I came out here because I said I need to visit 4 or 5 churches to understand what they're doing, and the North American Mission Board. And I came out here and I listened and learned. So it's just to be with the grown-ups at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. I was just a kid then.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's great to have you here. What are you doing here? What are you doing in Southern California? How'd you just decide you're tired of the Chicago winters?
Have you been in Chicago in January?
I have. Yes, you invited me.
Oh, that's true. You were there. Well, it was 3 years ago. It got down to minus 27 degrees Fahrenheit. Not wind chill, but actual temperature. That's like colder than a legalist's heart. So I was like, I gotta get out of here and start looking for a new job. No, so Barry Corey is the president of Biola University, and he and I've been friends for a while. I've spoken at Biola lots of times, and they having a dean search, and they asked me to apply for it. Prayed it through, and Donna and I talked it through, and she prayed it through, and we kind of came to the conclusion together. So I'm the new dean of the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. It's one of the university has a bunch of schools. So, like some folks have been around Southern California a while would know it as Talbot Seminary, and the seminary is the grad school part. And then, every student at Biola takes 30 hours. They get a Bible minor. One of the distinctives of Biola is, my daughter's a student there, but they get an undergraduate Bible minor. So I lead the seminary program and the undergraduate program as the dean of the Talbot School of Theology.
Wow, that is great.
Super excited about it.
Yeah, I think it's just so good that you're here in SoCal.
Do people say SoCal?
Yeah.
You just did.
I just
guess
did.
So. Okay.
And I'm a native, so if I said it, then
Because I tweeted it once, and someone responded and said, we don't say SoCal. It's Los Angeles and the OC. Well, Brian Brodersen, though, he's like the,
I'm fifth generation Californian, Southern California.
So I'm saying SoCal.
You know what? You can say SoCal. I'm giving you permission.
And some would debate that you shouldn't say the OC.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's just something that came up from a TV show a few years ago.
I'm going with SoCal then, because if Brodersen says to go with SoCal, it is written in stone for me.
Yeah, some people get kind of snippy about it.
They do.
But, who cares? So, Ed, but tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be the dean of Talbot School of Theology? What is a dean?
I'm trying to figure that out. I've been here about 2 though. No, I was a dean at Wheaton, so I know what a dean is. So Talbot is the fifth largest multi-denominational seminary in the world. So has about 1,200 students going to seminary, grad school kind of thing. And so part of my job is to help to tell that story. I've already mentioned how the undergrad, 30 hours. And so a dean's job is, I say sometimes I'm the CEO. I'm the chief encouragement officer of the school. So I've got a dean's team, dean's council, that Talbot leadership team, we call it. And just transparently, they do most of the dean kind of work. I mean, they have to. There's 5 of them. And so what I do is I'm trying to tell the story about the great work that Talbot School of Theology does. I'm connecting with pastors and church leaders to invite them into that kind of stuff. And Talbot itself is sort of, it is the theology school of Biola. So I'm working with the university. We're a conservative evangelical school. And, that is a tricky reality in 2023 and in California. California is not the most friendly state sometimes to the things that we believe and teach.
Yes.
But we want to be the kind of place that raises up, helps to educate young men and young women. And, I mentioned, the story about my daughter went to Biola before I did. A year ago, she came out here to go to school. So I just I already had super confidence in the school. So now my role is to continue to help carry on that legacy that goes back for 100 years. That is Biola University.
Yeah, Biola. I don't know how many people know that Biola is an acronym for Bible Institute of Los Angeles.
I think they would say it was an acronym.
It was an acronym.
Right, but that's exactly where it comes from.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can see when you come on campus, if you haven't been on campus, it's a beautiful campus, you can see the Jesus Saves sign. So it's kind of an iconic thing. So that came from Biola Church of the Open Door way back 100 years ago, and used to be in, would it be downtown Los Angeles today? I mean, is that, okay.
Yeah.
Because I know that has sort of shifted a little bit geographically. And so we still have we don't have the sign. The sign is actually an historic landmark, and I think it's down on that hotel or that venue that's still down there.
Yeah, you can still see it.
Gene Scott had that for a while, and which is fascinating. I know.
That's a blast from the past.
There's a name that you don't hear mentioned a lot. And so we, though, carry on the legacy. Yeah. And so Jesus Saves, I was just walking, my wife, Donna, who you know, and our friend, we were at the campus because it's my daughter's birthday today. So she's not listening because she's in class probably, but happy birthday, Caitlin. But we went over there to have lunch with her. We're walking on campus. And in the little cafe in the library, I forget what it's called, maybe the Heritage Cafe, there's a little Jesus Save sign. So Jesus Save signs are kind of all around there from the Bible Institute of Los Angeles days. Yeah,
and of course that, with the Jesus people movement, the Jesus Revolution, that thing only blew up over time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I mean, it became during the 60s. That was Jesus Saves was kind of a bumper sticker that you would see on lots and lots and lots of cars. So and
they would actually do it stylistically, like the neon signs. Yeah. So that was what sort of made it famous. So.
Yeah, and there's some illustrious names connected to Biola from way back. I think probably the one that comes to mind mostly when I think of Biola is the name R.A. Torrey.
Sure.
And Torrey was a powerhouse of a theologian who was a partner with D.L. Moody back in. So Moody was sort of I guess you could define him as sort of the Billy Graham of the previous generation, late 1800s, early 1900s. And R.A. Torrey was, in a sense, sort of theological mind behind Moody's ministry.
Yeah, Yale grad. You went to Yale Divinity School, and so very much so.
Yeah, but there were a couple of others. I think Griffith Thomas, W.H. Griffith Thomas. I think Campbell Morgan even had some in.
Really, I didn't know that. I think of the Moody connection.
Those guys were all sort of connected.
Right.
Back
for sure.
In those days.
For sure. Yeah. And of course, Torrey was connected with Moody Bible Institute since we got the Moody radio show, and I was the interim pastor of Moody Church.
Yes, I remember.
So it was kind of crazy. It was a crazy 4 years. Nobody should be the interim of anything for 4 years, but it was wonderful. I should say it was crazy, but it was just crazy. It went so long. I was the interim pastor of the Moody Church in Chicago for longer than 3 of the pastors were the actual pastor of the Moody Church in Chicago. So,
and the Moody Church is a historic. We're far removed from Chicago, so a lot of Southern Californians wouldn't know much about that, but I mean, this is like a major church.
It's pretty
in a city
fascinating.
That's been there for
it's like a long time. I mean, it's like a cathedral. It has 3,750 seats, And I used to say, they told me not to. I mean, I stopped when they told me not to. But I'd say, because Warren Wiersbe was there, you know,
Yes.
famously Warren Wiersbe and, you know, Harry Ironside, you know, so these are like,
Yes.
and Erwin Lutzer.
Alan Redpath.
Alan Redpath, sure.
Yeah.
Alan Redpath was there. I'm trying to remember, he walked through a season when they integrated the church. I think it was Redpath who did that. But, and of course, Erwin Lutzer, many people would still know that name, maybe more people today because he's on the radio. But I used to get in and say, because it was built, I mean, D.L. Moody never actually saw the Moody Church building that we were in. But when it was built in I'm trying to remember, it was 20s or the 30s, they built these wooden theater chairs. So it's super like not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, you've got some pretty sweet, comfortable chairs. But
We took out the pews.
oh no, I know it's nice though,
Yeah.
but they're comfortable now. So I would get up and say, like Warren Wiersbe did, "Come on in, everyone, grab a seat." Any seat, they're all equally uncomfortable. And everyone would laugh. And then the executive pastor, Bill Birchie's his name, said, "Don't say that. We do not want to emphasize that these seats are uncomfortable." I said, "Bill, but they know they are hurt." You know, the service is, an hour and 15 minutes, but you can make it that long. But it does, as a preacher, you're kind of aware that people are sitting on hard wooden seats.
Yes.
Depending on the length of your sermon.
Yeah, us guys who are preachers and love sort of the history of preaching and some names from the past, that we would all
We did kind of nerd out right there.
we would all resonate with. Well, I was in London, just recently, and I was once again in Westminster Chapel, which I've been in many times before, but that church was pastored by G. Campbell Morgan. So G. Campbell Morgan was Pastor Chuck Smith's favorite
I didn't know
Bible
that.
commentator. Oh yeah,
I didn't know that.
Chuck had a number of guys that he really resonated with, but Campbell Morgan was his man. As a matter of fact, if you ever read the Westminster Pulpit, which is a series of sermons by Campbell Morgan, you will find that there are some Chuck Smith sermons in there. Yes, amazing. Of course. I'll never forget. Chuck had this great sermon on I Have Played the Fool was the title of it, and that was a quote from King Saul. And it was just one of those messages, man. Every time you heard it, you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to play the fool. That it really, really spoke to you. And I'll never forget, as a young guy, Chuck gave me the Westminster Pulpit to put in my library. And I remember reading through some of those sermons. And all of a sudden I saw this sermon by Campbell Morgan, I Played the Fool. And I started reading it, and it was like, wait, Pastor Chuck said that. And how did Campbell Morgan get a hold of one of Chuck's sermons? And of course, it was
The other way around. Well, just age-wise, it would have to be the other way around.
Of course, it was. Yes, exactly. So
okay, now that's funny. This is like tales from the inside. This is like when you're now the pastor of Calvary Chapel, you can say these things. So did you go in? I went there. I preached there at Westminster Chapel.
yes, I did too.
You did too.
Ago. But I went back, and then Lloyd Jones, of course,
Right.
was.
Did you put on Lloyd Jones' robe?
I did not do that.
I did that.
You
I did that. So the pastor, was it Greg? Greg Haslam?
Greg Haslam, yeah.
So he let me put on the robe and go into the pulpit. I felt a little like over the top, but
Yeah.
still, I just thought maybe I'd get some extra anointing off that robe.
All of this is to say that those churches were not designed for comfort.
No, they were not.
Because
they
that
were
church
not.
had the same situation.
Oh, it's
Very
terrible. And it's
uncomfortable.
actually built similarly to Moody Church. So Moody Church has the largest non-columned amphitheater in the city of Chicago. So 3,750 seats, about half of them like sitting in this floating balcony. It's fascinating. And you would think with all the work they put in to make the balcony float, they could have made the things a little more comfortable, but they didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So what shocked me this time when I went in, now, I mean, nobody's interested in this. Why are Ed and I talking about
I'm
this?
sorry.
There's some preacher nerds out there
we
that
are
are going,
they're going to call in and say, tell us more about the chairs at Moody Church. So we just want to apologize to the amazing listeners at K-Wave, FM and AM from Ventura to San Diego. You see how I can do this?
So anyway, they took out, and you would know this. Remember, the ground level seating was all wooden pews. So they took them out. They removed them, and now they have chairs.
At Westminster?
Yeah, Westminster.
Oh, it must have
Chapel,
just happened.
And they put in a coffee bar in the back.
No.
So, yeah,
I'm not sure the doctor,
they're
Martin Lloyd Jones, would approve of that.
They're modernizing it,
Wow.
yeah. So,
Wow.
All right. So enough nerding out.
I
on
feel like we did not serve
preacher
the
stuff.
audience well, and it's my fault. I got excited.
No, you know what? People, it's okay.
Okay.
I mean, these are names.
Maybe some will
that-
call in and encourage us and say, no, tell us more about obscure history of the 19th century.
Maybe there's a few elderly folk that might.
The
enjoy
elderly,
this.
like us.
Like us.
Like us.
Like
I'm in
me.
my 50s for the record.
Yeah.
Hanging on.
Yeah.
Still.
Mid 50s.
Mid to later 50s.
Well,
So-
the number to call if you want to ask questions about church history
Or
in the 18th
chairs.
century or
Yeah.
chairs or whichever. 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. Does sitting in a wooden pew make you more holy?
It does. It actually
does.
does. It's a
Okay.
sanctification method.
Got it.
So it wasn't a pew. Now, when I came to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in 1998, they had wooden pews. So I remember sitting in wooden.
Well, they were cushioned though.
Yeah, well, they still were wooden. Didn't
Well,
take
yes,
away the
of
fact that there was
course. Yeah.
wood. You weren't sitting on a cushion.
No, you
this is
weren't.
not.
No,
But you weren't. It was like there was wood under
Under
the
the
cushion.
cushion, yes.
So I do remember that.
Yeah, this-
but now you got like these tan chairs.
Yes.
So fancy.
Oh, they're actually gray now.
Are they?
We changed out to gray. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So enough of the descriptions
Wow.
of the
The
comfortable.
level of
uncomfortable.
detail here is really
Yeah,
absurd.
Yeah, we're rising to new levels
Yeah.
of interest here. Ed, what
Brian.
are you excited about right now in the kingdom? I think of you as, and I like this whole concept. I think of you as a kingdom-minded person. You are a guy who's involved with so many different people within the larger church. You speak at conferences for Pentecostal groups and for people who would be on the other end of sort of the theological spectrum when it comes to maybe the ministry of the Holy Spirit. You speak to Calvinists, you speak to non-Calvinists. You're welcomed in a lot of different spaces. And what excites you? Number one, what excites you? And secondly, we'll go to what concerns you right now as you look at the bigger picture of the church. And we'll limit it to our country. I know you do stuff outside the country too.
And you just came back from like a tour of Europe. So
I did, yeah. And you are now also a professor at Oxford University in England.
Well, that's not actually public yet.
Well, it is
So-
now.
It is now.
I'm good at that. I'm good at making
Let's
things.
just say
Should
I
we
do
press the
some
dump button?
things. I do some things in England. Let's just say that.
Yes. and you do. So you're getting around.
And I should say that one of the things we'll be doing with Talbot is that students will be able to come over and take some joint courses like you did
Yes.
when you were at Wheaton.
Yes.
So yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you excited about with the church and what are you concerned about?
Yeah, so three things I think give me excitement and enthusiasm. I think one of them is to see a continued desire on the part of people to share the good news of Jesus, and it's growing. Now, again, I think it hit a low in a couple of years ago, but since then we've seen, a lot of people are talking about Jesus. We've got the He Gets Us campaign, which full disclosure, I'm involved with, has a lot of people talking about, who is this Jesus? We've seen these ads. We saw them in the Super Bowl, other places. That's fascinating. The movie Jesus Revolution with our friend Greg and the whole story here, connected to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. It is funny. I didn't even think about that. I literally talk about this a lot, and I'm now at the place. I'm at the room where it happened, to quote a musical. But I think people, Jesus Revolution just caught people by storm. Even the Asbury revival, The Chosen. I just think people are speaking much more about Jesus and are hungry to know who Jesus is. So that's number one. Number two, I think the continued rise of areas where we see churches that are maybe being planted or engaging in other missional activities, but particularly from a real diverse array of places. I don't know if you've been to immigrant churches and just see what the Lord is doing in powerful ways. You were just in London, and there was a stat, and I can't quote it off the top of my head, but the percentage of people who are going to church in central London is going up and up and up. It's not like 40%, but it's in the low teens from like single digits, and that's from people from around the world.
Yeah.
And people are responding as well. And to the gospel from different races, ethnicities, and background, which is a beautiful picture of Revelation 7, right? Men and women from every tongue, tribe, and nation. And third thing I would say is I'm still encouraged by church planting. I started as a church planter, and to see, I'll be up in NorCal. Do you say NorCal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I'm gonna do this.
And NorCal is very much a term that's
more so.
They use up there.
Okay, NorCal. And we're doing the Exponential Conference on church planting there. And I just see continual planting churches. I just I follow you on the Instas, and there's a church planter you were highlighting who's somewhere around here. I don't remember the name of the person, but you were highlighting one of the church plants. And the Calvary Global Network continues to do that. So those would be my 3 areas: people talking about Jesus, ethnic and immigrant churches, and also this just continued focus on church planting. And there's lots more, but those are 3 I often answer.
Yeah. And I'm going to stick with the positive for a second, because I do think that, I listen to a lot of podcasts. You listen to podcasts. You do podcasts. I do podcasts. And sometimes, and even today, I was listening to a podcast that I was just thinking, can we just get out of the doldrums here? I mean, it's just, a lot of it is so negative. And I thought, I wonder sometimes if it's not, if you kind of live in the social media world, I think you could always be tempted to think the sky is falling and, everything's unraveling and it's all coming to an abrupt halt. But it seems to me if you kind of just live in the actual world, there's still a lot of good things happening. And there are people like you just mentioned, Ed, there are people that I think the Jesus Revolution is a great example. It shows you that people are open to the gospel. I have met so many people who have seen the film. And one of the things that I think is absolutely fascinating is when people tell me they saw the film on a flight. I just think that is just brilliant, to get that film on flights. And I've talked to a few people who are not Christians who have seen the film, who are still not Christians, but were impressed by the film and really intrigued by it. So wanting to kind of explore and find out a little bit more. So I think there's more of that going on than you might suspect if you spend your life on X, formerly known as Twitter.
No one's going to go. We still call it the Sears Tower in Chicago, so just don't even bother. And I would just say, I think it's just true. I mean, the reality is, if you read social media, there's some, even there's secular people who don't like Christians, there's some Christians who can be really horrible on social media. Or if you read even secular media that's always sensationalizing stories. Again, let me be clear, there are some bad things that have happened. But, I go across the country and I meet people who are loving Jesus and doing gospel work, and millions upon millions of people. So God is alive and at work. Aslan is on the move in North America. Challenges for sure. I write about a lot of these challenges, so I'm not against the acknowledgement that there's challenges. But man, I'm thankful for what God is doing and now I get to see about it in Southern California. So it's a whole new world. To quote
whole different.
I could sing a Disney song because you now own what was a Disney channel.
That's right.
1:10 a.m.
There's probably
11:10 a.m.
Yeah, there's probably some people missing some of that Disney stuff.
Right now they're like, shouldn't be a ESPN Sports Center or something right now?
Yeah.
This is the furthest thing from Sports Center ever, because I know nothing about sports.
Yes. Oh, you have learned. I've noticed that you're growing in your sports knowledge.
I would just point out that you turned down to hang out with me at the Angels game tomorrow night.
I did.
But we're going to be there. And
Ed, listen, I'm 10 years older than you. Yeah. I've been there. I've done that.
You've done it all.
I do not need to.
So here's a fun fact, though, because you know that I threw out the
yes.
So I got Barry Corey. They gave us a first pitch opportunity at the Angels game. And so I got Barry Corey. So the president of Biola University will be throwing out the first pitch. So if people watch
I want to see a pastor president throw out a pitch, a guy who can actually pitch.
I did fine.
I don't know that it made it across the plate.
It was he didn't have to run to catch it. I got it to the plate.
It bounced in front of the plate.
That's just very close. Very close though. I was not
I couldn't do any better. I would have thrown it over the backstop.
I was not ashamed of that. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it was amazing.
Hey, your form looked good.
Thank you. And I got to tell you, George W. Bush is sort of the one. He saved America with that first pitch after 9/11. But I did better than a lot of presidents. I'll just say.
Yeah, I can think of one president that you actually did do better than, but I will leave him unnamed.
Yes. Who he threw out the first pitch at the same stadium 4 times. And I did better than all 4 of the times that he was at White Sox Stadium.
Okay, so getting back to the seriousness of this conversation. So let's talk about concerns, as you look at the broader picture. But I want to say this, and you'll get it. What are things that are real concerns? Because I think a lot of times I do find that some Christians, I think, sort of blow things out of proportion.
Yeah.
They tend to think that this is the worst thing that could ever have happened in the entire history of the church. And I actually had a conversation with somebody just a few days ago who was sort of insinuated in that. And I said, if you read a little more history, you probably wouldn't feel...
There have been some pretty bad things that have happened historically. Let's remember that we actually said, let's all go kill all the people in the Middle East. I mean, so this is not exactly an untarnished record.
Yes,
so,
and
I'm talking about some of the Crusades.
And as crazy as things are, because I do agree that things are crazy. As a matter of fact, I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, and they were talking about how crazy it is, and I said, yeah, but it could get a lot crazier. And so let's not overstate the case.
Historically, it has been, yeah.
Yeah, and I just try to put it in context because we were talking about history, and I said, well, think of Europe during the Second World War. That's a level of crazy that we can't even imagine.
Completely compromised, sold out, became an appendage of the Nazi state.
Yeah. So, but what are the? It's from your point of view.
Yeah.
As a person who's very familiar with church, as a missiologist, and as a person who's somewhat of a sociologist, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest issues that are from within. There's the issues from without, which we talk some about those. But I think issues from within would be a real sense that I think far too many Christians are being discipled by their cable news choices more than they are by the good news of the gospel and the teaching of their church. I think that far too many people are being influenced by social media and not necessarily influenced in a way of being in biblical community with people that love Jesus, love one another, and hold each other accountable. So I think those are big issues. I think consumerism in the church, again, I'm talking about stuff internal still. I think consumerism in the church.
What do you mean by that?
Where, people sort of pick their church based on their consumer preferences. Do I like the music? Do I like the preaching? And the church and the pastor almost become like a religious shopkeeper distributing religious goods and services. And if you do it the way I like, I'll stay at your church. If you don't do it the way I like, I'll go down to a church that caters more to my preferences. And I just would want to see people have a higher view of what we call ecclesiology. The ecclesiology is just a big theological word for the study or theology of church, that will actually dig in together and go on a journey together and say, this is our church community, and we're going to love one another, we're going to love Jesus, we're going to love his mission, and we're going to stay rooted in relationship with one another. And I just don't see that as much. I think consumerism in the culture has seeped into the church and has caused people not to be driven by the mission, but to be driven by their preferences.
Yeah. Yeah, I listened to a podcast today, and the guy said something that I thought was fascinating. He was talking about, how, kind of like what you're saying, how people will choose a church based upon maybe their political position or based upon the style of worship or based upon the recognition of the pastor. And he said, how many people come to a church and ask this question: what is your discipleship like?
Wouldn't that be amazing?
And that's what he said. He said, nobody's ever asked me that question. And that is the core of what we are supposed to be about. But it's interesting that nobody thinks about that.
For sure. And I think ultimately that's a reminder for Christians to say, we want that. Yeah. Because really you do. At the end of the day, you don't want to have a church that panders to your whims. You want a church that helps you to grow deeper, to provoke you to love and good deeds, like the writer of Hebrews says.
Yeah. And especially if we do believe that things are going from bad to worse.
And I think they probably are.
Yeah. We need to be solidly grounded in the faith in order to persevere through the difficult season that we're in, and maybe even that is ahead of us.
You are listening to Pastor's Perspective. Brian Perez here, along with Brian Broderson, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and our guest, Ed Stetzer, the dean of the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. And we are here until 4 p.m. Pacific time, so give us a call, 888-564-6173. Got some calls on the board. We'll try to get to those when we come back from the break. Give us a call, 888-564-6173. Welcome back to Pastor's Perspective. Brian Perez here with Brian Broderson and our special guest, Ed Stetzer, whom you hear on the radio here on our flagship station, K-Wave, from Ventura to San Diego County. That's how you can hear K-Wave now on AM 1110 or FM 107.9. Ed does a program called Ed Stetzer Live,
The most creatively named program ever. I mean, we made fun of the people at Moody Radio when they came up with that.
And how many millions were spent on coming up with that?
I know, exactly. Did we have a creative team? But they said, it's you and you're live. And I'm like, okay, well, fair enough. And we do. We take calls. And our most frequent place we get calls now is actually from the K-Wave audience. And that's before you became the behemoth that goes from Ventura to San Diego because of 1110. How do you say it?
1110.
1110. Okay, you should read it. It's pretty simple. 1110 a.m. So welcome.
Let me give you just a quick little
please
trivia about 1110. So when I was a kid, 1110 was the call letters were KRLA. KRLA and KHJ were the two big rock and roll AM stations. This is before nobody listened to FM at this time. Right. It was like underground radio. And so these were the two powerhouses broadcasting into California, music from the 60s. And in 1964, KRLA was the first Southern California station to play the Beatles.
No way.
Yes.
Seriously.
Seriously.
How interesting. And now it's playing Brian Broderson and Ed Stetzer talking about the difficult nature of furniture in churches because we had a party here on K-Wave. Is K-Wave like both 107.9 and 1110 are K-Wave?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if they were different call signs. Okay.
Yeah, they're both.
Simulcast.
Yep.
All right, 888-564-6173 is the number to call with your questions. You can also send in your questions on Facebook Messenger, and here's one of those. It was sent in by Roger with a question on 2 Peter 3:12. Roger says, this seems to give a connotation that we can speed up the Lord's return. But in the verses preceding this, it talks about the Lord being patient and not wanting anyone to perish, and his return will be unexpected like a thief in the night. That and other verses sound like the Lord will come when he alone decides when it is the right appointed time per his divine plan. What do you guys think? Brian, we'll start with you.
Well, it does kind of seem to say that.
It does.
People you're not the first person to notice that or make that comment. And so, doing these things to hasten, I think is the New King James, the way the New King James says it, to hasten the day of the Lord. And so there, obviously the Bible has a lot to say about the time of the Lord's return and the circumstances. And of course, the main thing is that nobody actually knows the day or the hour.
So you shouldn't set dates.
You shouldn't set dates, and we're not setting any dates here. But there is, if you just think about it, there really is. There will be, in one sense, sort of that last person that will trigger everything. You could analyze it to that level and say, yeah, that this will be a thing. And so I don't know exactly why Peter said this, except I think that the Spirit inspired him to say that we should be about the work of the Lord. And because obviously until the Lord's work is done, he won't return. So then conversely, when his work is done, he will return. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, let me add to that. My field is missiology. I'm a missiologist, and there's a kind of a verse like unto it, to use a Bible phrase. It's Matthew 24:14, which says that this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come.
Yeah.
So we don't really know the connection or the timing of any of those things, but we do know that the Lord has given us a call to be about his mission. Jesus says, as the Father has sent me, even so send I you. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do those things, knowing that that's part of the Lord's plan before he comes.
Yep.
And how does that relate to is it hastened in this way? Is it hastened? We don't really know.
We don't know.
But what we know is while we're waiting, we are faithful to the mission, and we join Jesus in his work in the world in the power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. And we can take Peter at his word to say, okay, in some way, that even that we don't know exactly, in some way, this is hastening the day of the Lord.
Right.
So
we just don't know. And I think it's helpful. A lot of times, I think with people who love the Bible, and I think it's a good thing. We love the Bible. We love the detail. We believe in inerrancy. So we believe that the words are there for a reason. But the words aren't always there with the level of specificity that we want. So what does that mean? Well, Peter doesn't give the dictionary definition right afterwards. So we just know, let's do what the Lord calls us to do. And when he comes back, he'll find us faithful.
yeah.
Roger, thanks for sending that in on Facebook Messenger. One more before we go to the phones, 888-564-6173. We'll give this one to Ed. Marco writes, since disease is a result of sin and Jesus was sinless, does this mean that Jesus never got sick?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that the fall resulted in that sin caused the fall, and that in doing so, with the cause of the fall, the consequences were the brokenness of the world. So the Bible never records Jesus having a health episode or a health difficulty. But I don't think that Jesus, in taking on a human form, being fully God and fully man, then was precluded from, and I'm interested in your answer as well. You have a good question for your audience. Precluded the fact that, because he took on, so he was weakened, he was tired. We actually know that. Mm-hmm. And I certainly think that within the realm of taking on the frail human body, that everybody in a frail human body does at some point get sick. So I don't think the Bible precludes that as a possibility, or in the case of this, the sinlessness of Jesus, because the brokenness that's in the world is already there as a result of the fall, but it's already there, and Jesus didn't participate in that sin, but he still lived in a broken world. So I would say, yes, I think Jesus probably experienced human sickness. He certainly experienced human frailty, and he bled when he was struck. He experienced those realities. But you can tell me if I'm wrong, because I just answered across Southern California.
No. I think you're right, and I do think that. I was thinking even about the suffering of Christ. And the Bible refers to the sufferings of Christ. He suffered. So if you were to exclude him from sickness, then you might take the next step and exclude him from experiencing pain.
We know that he did, right?
We know that he experienced pain, yes. So I would say in order for Jesus to fully empathize with us, as Hebrews says that he does, he is able to sympathize with those who have weaknesses. I think he would have to have experienced some level.
Yeah, and I just thought of something that might also be helpful. So when we talk about the sweating of blood in the garden, I mean, that is a medical condition. Yeah. That's a sickness.
That is, yeah.
And we don't know that. I mean, we know we sweat blood. We don't know if it's specifically that medical condition, but it does sound like it would be.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would say too is, Matthew speaks of Jesus taking on the infirmities. He bore our griefs and carried Isaiah, the New King James, which is the one that's forever locked in my brain.
Is that what you preach from?
Well, I've been preaching from the NIV for 2 years, but I just can't remember any NIV.
Right, you got to memorize it. It's so much better sometimes than the King James version to remember a verse. It's true.
Exactly, but he has borne our weaknesses and carried our sorrows from Isaiah, but literally the Hebrew in Isaiah is he has borne our weaknesses and carried our sicknesses. Mm-hmm. So it is literally sicknesses. So I think that you're right.
So a step further, if I'm allowed to do this, Brian. Yeah. By the way, the fact that there's two Brians on this program is a little confusing, Brian Perez. So then is healing ultimately in the atonement, would Jesus work? Is that healing for us now? Is that healing for us later? How does that relate?
By his stripes we are healed. Yeah, I think that you would have to say that the healing in the atonement is primarily spiritual. It's the healing of sin. One day it will manifest itself entirely, but not presently, because of course we know that the followers of Jesus themselves suffered sickness, and so they didn't see that because they believed in Jesus and by his stripes we are healed, we're never sick. Mm-hmm. You know what Paul says to Timothy, you have oft infirmities, take some wine for your infirmities. Paul talks about his thorn in the flesh, which seems to be that it was a chronic illness. So yeah, the prosperity idea that healing is in the atonement, which means you should never be sick, I think is incorrect.
Yeah, we have a professor at Biola just wrote a whole book on the thorn in the flesh. And so people are talking about it, and it's kind of interesting. People have maybe missed and kind of unpacking that more, but I think it's interesting as we kind of think through what does it ultimately mean to have this thorn in the flesh. So anyway, it's kind of fascinating. So I think that probably it's a physical ailment of some sort. And this is Kenneth Birding, is called Paul's Thorn in the Flesh. Again, a whole book on the subject. But there's so much, I mean, we all have speculated about it. It's an eye injury, write this with large letters. So I think it helps us to think about even issues of sickness for Christians.
Well, you know, I even heard years ago, prosperity teachers say that, well, you know, if you look at Scripture, thorns were the product of sin. And therefore, Paul's talking about sin in his life. He has some sin in
I haven't
his
heard
life,
that.
Which, that would go back quite a few years with some of the Copeland Hagen type.
Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagen, yeah.
Yeah. So.
The Kenneths, like different than the Bryans, but the Kenneths. The Kenneths.
Different doctrine for sure.
Oh,
for sure,
definitely.
For sure.
Marco, thank you for sending in your question on Facebook Messenger. Now we're going to go to the phones, 888-564-6173. We were just talking about Bible translations. So Ruth in Moreno Valley, California, go ahead. What's your question for us today?
Yes, hi. Bless you guys. And so I just really enjoy listening to your program.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you so much for being blessed.
Oh, so glad to. Ruth, did you enjoy the discussion of the chairs?
I enjoyed all you guys talking. All your whole I've listened to it since you first started.
Thank you. You're awesome, Ruth. Thank you.
Your little banter you guys are having back and forth. And
you can tell we're friends.
You know, to see brother and love each other,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
and then enjoy each other. Praise God. Well, my question was, I have a cousin and she says she prays to God, but she doesn't know about Jesus. And she said because she doesn't even know if the Bible is really true, because, you know, when the Bible was written, he only, you know, he wrote it for himself and, you know, so he could understand it. Now you got the NIV and all these other, you know, versions of the Bible. So she's saying she doesn't really believe in what the Bible says. So she's on her own personal journey.
Yep.
And I was trying to share with her, well, you can't have God without having Jesus.
Yep.
And you can't have them without the Holy Spirit because they're one. So I don't know. And then she's always saying, well, my God, she said, I don't know what kind of God you have. I said, there's only one God, only one true and living God. So I don't understand.
Sounds like a lively conversation with your cousin.
Yeah.
I think I like Ruth. Ruth sounds fun. That's good. First of all, I love that you're having this conversation with her as well. That's awesome.
Totally. Yep.
Well, Ruth, I would.
She was in a cult for like 34 years.
What cult was she in?
Her understanding is really off.
What was she involved in for 34 years?
It was some kind of. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't talk to your family.
Oh wow, yeah.
You know, you can only listen to him.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
There wasn't any Bible there. You only listen to what he preached. He was saying you can't watch TV, you can't look at magazines, you can't, you know, all this can't stuff. But then when you went to his house, he had a big TV and he had everything that he was telling them not to do.
Ouch. I can tell you, I've been to Brian Broderson's house. He doesn't, I don't know, you have a regular TV, but it ain't
I
that
do have a
crazy.
regular TV, and I never preach against
With a tube in the back.
watching
one of
Yeah,
those.
exactly. He probably does.
Yeah, you know, like one of those, and they had that sort of thing on the top, the rabbit ears. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
You don't have rabbit ears at your house, do you really? Okay,
He
sorry.
might.
I did
Ruth,
10
I apologize.
10 years
We are
ago.
so easily distracted here, Ruth. Let's talk about the chairs in your house.
Squirrel.
They're very comfortable. Squirrel. Exactly.
So, Ruth, the problem, obviously it's a problem, but she's not. She needs to read the Bible, and you need to challenge her to pick a version. If she doesn't like the NIV, then have her pick the King James, or she needs to pick a version of the Bible, with the exception of the New World Translation, because that is a cultic, that she'd be right back in the boat that she coming out of the cult. That's a Jehovah's Witnesses version of the Bible. But if she will take the scriptures, and I would just simply challenge her to read the New Testament, to read the Gospels, and ask God. You know, here's the beautiful thing. God is real. God is alive. He's living, and he wants to reveal himself to people. And if a person is sincerely seeking God and comes to God and says, I don't know who you are, I don't really know much about you, but I'm going to read the Bible, and God, if this is true, then show it to me. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people have met the Lord simply by doing that. So I would just keep that challenge before her. And I would almost say, look, I'm not going to talk to you about this stuff until you need to read the Bible, not just speculate about it, not just say what you've heard other people say about it, that it can't be trusted. Read it for yourself and ask God to show you if it's true. And we can count on the Lord to do that.
I think there was a little bit of a question around like her not having confidence in Bible translations. And let me just say that, for mainstream Bible translations, so they typically have a few letters for them, like CSB or NIV or ESV or KJV or NKJV, New King James Version. You might just explain to her that all of these Bible translations are called translations, not because they're changing language in modern from one to the other. They're actually going back to manuscripts that we believe are inerrant and inspired. And thus, there are multiple translations because over time, the King James Version, we don't say suffer the little children anymore to come to me. We don't use the word suffer in the same way they did. Mm-hmm. So language changes. Translations can help us to see things more clearly, but she can have confidence that the Bible, and we believe that they're in the original autographs, we say. It means manuscripts. The original manuscripts was inerrant, inspired, and what we have is good, reliable translations of that. And I would be rejoiced if any person who didn't know the Lord was reading any of the translations we mentioned, I just listed right there, and she can be encouraged that, she can learn what the Lord's doing through the Bible.
Yep.
Thank you for calling us today, Ruth. Now we're going to go down to San Diego and speak with Seth. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective. You're on with Brian Broderson and our guest, Ed Stetzer. Go ahead, Seth.
Yes. Hello, pastors. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
My question is from 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 11. So is this referring to a member of the church that is unrepentant? And how do we apply this verse to the modern church? And also, if I can get a second question, if possible.
Now, is there somebody at your church that you're wondering how to deal with a certain problem that's come up? Is that why you're asking?
No, it's not in particular. It's just that we're doing a study in Corinthians, and I understand that Corinthians church had a lot going on. But I do understand that sometimes we may need to disfellowship or to no longer continue to fellowship with someone, and I'm just kind of curious on how do we deal with that as a church.
I'm not sure though. Is that 1 Corinthians 6:11, or isn't that 1 Corinthians 5:9 we're talking about here?
Well, that was going to be my question because
is it 5:11? Yeah, not 6.
Yeah, 5:9 through 11. That's no problem. Yeah, it's just we like the fact that you even had some of the numbers close, so that's all good. So the idea that have nothing to do with such a person, a so-called believer, continues in sin, and the idea of church discipline, which also we can point to Matthew chapter 18. There's probably 3 key passages people look to with the church discipline.
So, Paul says not to keep company with, and he specifies those who are. When he says those who, a brother, he's talking about somebody who is simultaneously professing to be in fellowship with God, in good standing with God, but then living a willfully sinful life, a life that God has called us to turn away from. And so he's talking about people like that. And he's saying not to associate. And when he says associate, he means not to associate in a fellowshipping way, not to, in a sense, you could use the term maybe like the right hand of fellowship. Don't give them the right hand of fellowship and say, hey, brother, this is great. Yeah, everything's cool. It's all good. Doesn't matter that you're living in sin. I think he's talking about a person who is defiant toward the word and the will of God. And he's saying don't associate with those people. And the disassociation is for the purpose of getting them to wake up and realize that they've got a serious problem here. And so, when Paul says don't even eat with such a person, people have asked the question, well, gosh, like my kids are, they're not walking with the Lord today. Should I not have them over for dinner? No, that's not what Paul is not even addressing that there. He's really dealing with making sure that we're not condoning or enforcing the sin in a person's life by treating them as though everything is good with their current state.
Yeah, and I would say, depending upon the tradition that this person is in, the church that they go to, we call this church discipline. The most serious would be the Amish, would be shunning. Mm-hmm. So they literally would say this verse and say, we can't at all associate with you. We have to ban ourselves from you. Actually, you talked about Jehovah's Witnesses before.
Yeah.
They take this and they literally just, like family members, can't speak to family members who persist in this way. Others, maybe more commonly, would say that these are people that can't partake in the Lord's Supper. Don't even eat with such a one. They can't partake in the Lord's Supper because they're under discipline and an unrepentant sin. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just how you associate it more. But at the end of the day, Paul wants to say, and there's two key things there. One is he's not talking about non-Christians.
Right.
It says specifically, not at all meaning the people of the world who are immoral or the greedy and swindlers. In that case, you'd have to leave the world. So holiness, or Christian ministry, is not separation from sinners, it's separation from sin. So we get that. But then that so-called Christian who continues in unrepentant sin, there's some action or activity where there's a setting apart that is different, that this person maybe can't partake in the Lord's Supper together, something, some churches will practice a formal approach to church discipline. They'll actually get up and share this person's name. Do you do that? Have you done that here at Calvary Chapel, where you actually say this person's under discipline of the church?
No.
Okay, I've done it at two times at different churches over the years. Just someone who is just an egregious, unrepentant, adulterous sin, and yet still wanted to come and be part of the church and say it was just no big deal. I've got a new wife now, and like right then, like I'm still married to her, but now I'm with this one, and we said, you just can't do that, and we had to take action as a church, which is unusual today, but not so unusual 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. And I have done that over the years, but not maybe in a slightly different way.
Right, and there are ways to do it that are more informal or more formal. Yeah. And the thing is what happens is if you're in a denomination, you tend to build a tradition around this. Like Presbyterians have a process for this in the PCA, for example, or the LCMS has the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, whereas in free church traditions like your church and mine, there's less of a process. It's often handled more informally.
Yeah.
Thank you for your phone call today, Seth, on Pastor's Perspective, 888-564-6173. Patricia in La Mirada, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask how to honor our lost loved ones.
I would like to say that Patricia is in La Mirada. What else is in La Mirada? Biola University. Okay, sorry. Brian, go ahead.
So, Patricia, just give me an idea of what do you mean by that? Like, honor them publicly or privately or?
Well, my father will be dead going on 6 years this next Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And I've never been around people who, have lost loved ones. And I was curious what to do, honor them, go to the gravesite, put flowers. Mm-hmm. The only person who's directing me on any of this would be my Catholic friend. And I really don't want to go Catholic on everything she tells me. So
what is she telling you to do? If I might ask.
Fine, but she's telling me to go out there, put a flag, put something he liked. She wants me to pray to him, which I am not going to pray to him. I know he's dead.
Right.
I might.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord for him being in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a very personal thing, and I don't think there's any one thing that you could say that everybody needs to do this to honor their loved one that's passed. I think you decide yourself what is appropriate for you, what you feel comfortable with. Some people maybe do annually visit the grave of their loved one and put flowers on it or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you? Yeah.
My sister, so I go back whenever I'm in Orlando and go see her, her gravesite.
Yeah. And then other people, I think, probably do nothing. They just simply remember the day and then they move on. My father-in-law, we're going to be coming up on 10 years ago that he went to be with the Lord, October 3rd, 2013, and we're going to honor him by reflecting on him, writing a few articles and doing a few interviews and things, just talking about his life. He was a public figure. He was a great leader in the church. And
Chuck Smith?
Yeah,
Yep.
10-year point here. I think that's going to be appropriate for us
I would think
to do.
so. And I would just say quickly that honoring our ancestors is something that cultures around the world do, where it crosses a line where it kind of puts that person in a place of spiritual oversight or something in your life that's no longer there.
Yeah.
But honoring your ancestor, honoring your parents, and honoring those who've died is a wonderful and beautiful thing. We just lost a professor at Biola, and we've had lots of memorials, and we'll probably continue to do so. Her impact.
Yeah,
has
and
been
you
deeply felt.
just lost your stepdad.
I did. Yeah, I was just recently killed in a car accident. And we'll have a memorial service. So don't be afraid to honor those that you love beforehand. Just don't put it in a spiritual place that replaces the role of God, the Holy Spirit in your life.
Patricia, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. We have run out of time. Great episode
fun,
today.
though.
We're going to archive it on Facebook and YouTube and Spotify so you can check it out later. And don't forget, Ed Stetzer is here on our flagship radio station every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. So tune in on AM 1110 or FM 107.9 or on the K-Wave radio app if you're outside of Southern California. Do you know your topic for tomorrow, Ed?
No.
No. Okay. Well, then you can call Ed with any questions.
We're going to talk about cross-cultural engagement, a wonderful author, Asian-American author. That's what we talk about with her.
Awesome. Tomorrow morning at 9, Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.